In my last video, I recommended a game called Gravity Rush, which finally got a follow-up after around 5 years. Hopefully since that video, many of you have been able to give it a try, because today we're taking everything we learned from the first Gravity Rush to the next level with this massively expanded sequel. We're going from a portable console that fit in your pocket to a game using all of the power of the PS4, and because of that, Gravity Rush 2 makes the first game look pocket-sized in comparison. They didn't pour these newly gained resources into rendering dynamic chest hair or anything like that. They used it to create an absolutely massive world that feels like it takes everything from the first game, fully realizes it, and then multiplies it. This is an extremely faithful sequel, and it doesn't feel like they made any compromises to their vision to make it easier for new players to get into now that it's a PS4 game. It even has the same style of presentation and structure that the original game had, which makes the experience feel very familiar. This feels like the sequel they wanted to make through and through, and if you can follow it, good, but if you can't because you didn't play the last game, then that's too bad. It really doesn't shy away from making references to events and characters from the first game, so if you haven't played it, you may be even more confused than normal, especially when it comes to the mechanics of the world. I mean, you're gonna be confused regardless, so there's no need to add on to that. Even if you have played the first game, the setup this time around is still very strange. The game opens in a way you really wouldn't expect, aboard a dark, dirty mining colony in another dimension, almost subverting your expectations of what a Gravity Rush sequel should be. But before you even play the game, you need to watch an animated short that was made as a prequel to the main story, explaining how Cat and company ended up crossing over into this world. It's a very strange way to convey the opening to a very strange story, but it'll be the least of your problems as you try to comprehend what's actually happening right in front of you. Eventually the game opens up and you'll be blown away at the scale and design of the world, and how much freedom you have to explore it. I was actually held back from exploring at first because of how I've been conditioned by modern game design. I saw a huge city in the distance and thought, nah, no point in trying to fly over there, I'll just be sent back. I can probably only get there through a specific transportation option later in the story that lets me travel between self-contained hubs. But no, this world is like 5 different huge areas layered on top of one another, each with its own theme and atmosphere that you can freely explore at your leisure. There are so many games that have tackled the concept of a floating city for their setting, but it's always a backdrop to a linear game that wouldn't change at all if the setting was moved to, say, under the sea. The concept has never been brought to life more than it is here. This isn't a highly scripted walk through hallways that just so happen to have floating buildings in their skyboxes. This is an actual series of floating areas that you can travel to and around at your will, and fly and fall through based on how you play. And this isn't even the only city to explore in the game, as Hexville also returns, sporting a huge graphical overhaul and a string of interesting twists on what you're familiar with that you'll just have to play to see. The level of interactivity with the landscape of the city and its citizens has also been upped. This isn't just a pretty landscape to look at, it's a playground to climb and jump around that can be attacked at any angle due to Cat's gravity powers. You still can't go around getting into shootouts with cops, but there are new ways to interact with the people around you in a very Gravity Rush way. You're always going to have something to do in the game, and they put a lot of effort into providing optional content and unlockables that the first game lacked. For every main mission, it seems like there are 3 optional side missions. Playing around with the camera they give you as well as the emotes you can unlock is really fun. There are also a ton of unlockable costumes to change into at the snap of a finger. You even get all of the outfits from the first game if you have a save file from the remaster, which is really cool. Then there are challenges, various different collectibles, and even small online features like sharing photos and using the help of others, leaving hints to find hidden treasure. You can even go mining for ore to level up, where you can gain rare talismans to equip which provide special effects to Cat. Along the way, you might even find furniture to customize the look of Cat's home. Even without this increase in side content, exploring every nook and cranny of this massive world is interesting enough for me, and the main storyline is much longer than the first game. Replaying the first game for my video took 2 sittings to beat, while this game took me over a week, mostly because I didn't want the game to end and I wanted to do all of the optional content to delay the inevitable. The story is kinda strange and meandering at the beginning, and you might be wondering where the hell it's going with things, but eventually it all starts to come together and make sense, and you realize everything that was happening was for a purpose later on. While I was confused in the moment, looking back, everything makes a lot more sense, and there's a surprising amount of narrative cohesion between the first and second half that I didn't think there would be. The story continues the fun and exciting, but at the same time bleak and depressing tone that the first game set up, and probably takes that element even further this time around. I find it really commendable that this series chooses to take on such dark themes and still remain so positive overall. It's an acknowledgement that at the heart of life is hardship, and you can't just ignore the sleazy elements of the world when trying to highlight the good in it. Even the very design of the first city is based around the idea of class division, with the poor living down below in shacks, the average Joes working labor jobs just above, business-savvy people living in skyscrapers above them, and the rich living in splendid manors even higher. Then above all else is the city's oppressive military fortresses that watch over them, ready to correct anyone messing with the status quo. There are so many new and interesting characters that appear in the story, and each one grew on me as things continued. Reoccurring characters like Sid and Raven also have much more personality than they did in the first game, because of the increased amount of voice acting, cutscenes, and overall screen time. Raven didn't leave that much of an impression on me in the first game, but she's really fun to be around here and is probably one of my favorite characters now. While characters just sort of appeared for short story moments in Gravity Rush 1, they feel like they're more of an organic part of this world now, as you'll see them hanging around and talking to one another between missions. One of the biggest game changers outside of the new setting is the addition of 2 new gravity styles. This gives you 3 different styles to play around with overall. You have your normal style from the first game, which just feels better to control than it did previously, but you also have the Lunar and Jupiter styles. This is Gravity Rush's take on the light and heavy fighting styles we've seen done before in many action games, but it feels like there's a lot more to these styles conceptually. They actually fit into the theme of gravity manipulation, as the Lunar style switches you to low gravity and the Jupiter style increases gravity's effect on you. These changes affect your movement entirely, not just what attacks you do. In the Lunar style, you can rocket into the sky with a single jump and float down like a feather. You may have a low gravity capacity, but you can rely on your natural parkour abilities to get around. The dive kick is replaced by a teleporting flurry of kicks that you can use to quickly catch up to fast-moving enemies. The Jupiter style has almost no mobility options, and you sink like a rock when flying through the air. This is a more combat-focused style where you throw your weight around to deal heavy damage. Both of these styles have appropriate places where you're going to want to use them, but most of the time you're going to want to stick to your default style, which is just much easier to control. The most important thing is that unlike the first game, it doesn't feel like your only option in combat is to dive kick your enemy's weak points over and over again. You actually have options now, and things are a lot more engaging because of that. Even ground-based melee feels like it has a purpose now, and not just because of the Jupiter style. You gain a lot more of your special meter from beating up groups of enemies, and you can string together many more attacks in a single combo. Throwing items has also been significantly improved, to the point where it becomes a constant element of combat. In the first game, you had to try to find an item to throw, stand next to it while you created a stasis field, aim, and then throw it. Now, with the press of a button, items from the environment come flying into you to be used as ammunition. Each style has its own variation on this, and you can even lift up enemies and throw them into each other. So during combat, you're always looking for something to throw while you also kick enemies yourself. The great thing about the styles is that you can switch between them instantaneously, which is a problem many action games have when first implementing style systems like this. Without missing a beat, you can switch between them to fit your current situation. And even if you don't need to, it's just fun to mix things up. These styles really remind me of how much of a breath of fresh air Gravity Rush is in gaming's current landscape. Manipulating 3 different variations of gravity while flying through laterally designed cities and worlds. It's all so dynamic and based around your specific interactions with a series of systems to get the results you want. I'm so amazed at how simple Gravity Rush 1 looks in comparison to this game. It's a total upgrade on almost every front. It feels like every ambition the team started this series with has been realized in this game, and while there's still room for improvement, this is another game worth being proud of. It gives me a bit of a Bayonetta 2 vibe in the sense that I never thought I'd see these characters in this world again, but here they are ready to take part in a fantastic new adventure. I know I didn't go into a crazy amount of detail with the story, but that's because it's such a new game and I want you to experience it for yourself. It's a real treat to those who stuck with the series up to this point, and I hope this isn't the end for Kat and the rest of this increasingly expansive and captivating world. But if this is the last of the series, then it was a worthy end that tied up most of the loose ends I was interested in. I just don't want this to be the end of a series with such a charismatic cast of characters and engrossing world, but whatever Keiichiro Toyama decides to direct next, I'm sure it's going to be great. He says he plans on making a new action-adventure title, so here's hoping that will be just as interesting as Gravity Rush was. Give this game a shot along with the first one if you haven't, and enjoy yourself. Don't let a charming experience like this slip through your fingers. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.